Sal writes in, though, this is a good team to discuss. The Bengals have the most interesting offseason, IMO. What do you think of the cheap-ass Cincinnati Bengals this offseason with a lot of pieces and their quarterback going on podcasts and trying to explain how the cap works to fans to put pressure on his owner and the organization as a whole?
I don't know if I believe they have the most interesting offseason ahead, but they have one of the most interesting off seasons. I'm like fascinated. Like, how do you go about fixing the Bengals? I feel like they have to sort of start over and figure out what they are going to be beyond just Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow. Like,
and T. Higgins.
Well, T. Higgins is a free agent, right?
And that's a part of this, right? So like they can make it work.
My assumption is that T. Higgins isn't coming back because he's probably not worth that amount of money unless you were just committed to, yes, we want this to be what the Bengals are no matter what. Like, I just don't see how that works.
Well, and the bigger issue with them this last year was not the offensive side of the ball, it was the god-awful defense.
But it's also, I think, don't they have issues with their offensive line? Like, they have issues all over that roster. It's not like they're healthy T. Higgins away from being a really good playoff team. They might have won a couple more games, but they struggled in a lot of facets last year.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think they have to kind of like rebuild structurally on defense. It's Trey Hendrickson and then a bunch of questions.
And a new coordinator. Yeah. Well, you know what's wild? I was looking at their losses. So, they lost to a lot of good teams. Steelers, playoff team. Chargers, playoff team. Ravens, playoff team. Eagles, they won the Super Bowl. Baltimore, playoff team. Commanders, playoff team. Chiefs. But then they have that first loss of the season that started the 0-3 start to the Patriots, and they also went 1-4 after their first 5 games. So they put themselves in such a big hole. I think they're interesting to me because I want to know if they are serious about the putting together a team around Burrow, or if we are like a year and a half away from him asking out because they're just not trying like he wants them to. And I'd be pissed if I were him. Like, as a fan of a team that also does not manage the cap or seem to care to.
So this is where you're going to talk yourself into Joe Burrow to the Cowboys?
No. It's more, I feel really bad for Bengals fans, and I feel bad for Burrow that it's like, sorry that you got picked by the team and ended up having a great nucleus around him. But their owner just does not care to do the things that are required. When you have a quarterback like this is winning the lottery, man. Like, his numbers last year were insane. 43 touchdowns, 9 picks. And you could say, well, Josh, they had a bad defense. And they did, and they were playing from behind a lot. And they were. But 43-9, 4,900 passing yards, 70% completion percentage. Yeah. Like, I know that you and I have had a lot of debates about him over the last few years. I still think that he is a guy you can absolutely win the Super Bowl with. But, man, it just feels like in that conference, I thought he was going to be in the mix forever. And now it's almost like he's a forgotten guy because it's not that the other players have surpassed him, and I don't even think he's fallen off. It's the team around him has just gone down quite a bit over the last 2
Well, yeah, I mean, and then you wonder if he's just going to be Matthew Stafford with the Lions.
Yeah.
Where you have a couple great seasons that get to the playoffs, but for the most part, you're just kind of treading water or trying to survive in this organization that doesn't seem like they can figure out how to put one foot in front of the other.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated from the standpoint of what do you choose to address? Like, that's why I don't think that you go sign T. Higgins. I think you try.
By the way, they franchised him, so he is still there.
Yeah, I mean, well, could it be a tag and trade?
I guess it could.
You theoretically could trade him to someone else who figures out the contract or whatever it is. I mean, that's what maybe the Vikings do with Darnold if he ends up going to the Raiders.
Yeah,
you control his ability to go there, and you try to get some draft compensation or what have you. But yeah, it fascinates me because that team just need a reset. Like, they allowed themselves to continue to build off of the same framework that got them to the Super Bowl, and they lost the Super Bowl, and then they never felt like they introduced anything that was better than what they already had in 2021.
Well, and they tried to run it back the next year, and they got close, right? Yep. They were in the game. The issue, weirdly, with them,
have probably won that game.
They were very close to winning that game. The thing that I guess kind of stuns me is that they start slow every single year. And so they have put themselves in a bigger hole. And those years in 21 and 22, they were good enough to overcome it. But the last 2 years, they have not been. And I mean, they started 1-4 and they were still in the playoff mix. Yep. But, you can't lose to the Patriots. One of the more perplexing losses.
Certainly not in that division because it is such a tough division.
Yeah. Put yourself so far behind the 8 ball immediately.
Yeah. Well, you just know you're going to get a tough game when you play Baltimore and Pittsburgh twice a year, and you're going to get usually Cleveland at this juncture. Cleveland's good enough that it's a difficult game when you're playing them too. So
who is the most interesting team in the offseason?
I mean, my bias would be the Vikings because they have all the pieces, but not a quarterback. They have the most cap in the NFL at this point in time, cap space. They have a massive decision to make about whether JJ McCarthy is the future of your organization. What do you use that money on to build back with a team that won 14 games last year, but ended its season not looking like it could even win 4? So, from an extremely biased standpoint, because of that quarterback conversation, they're very much in that discussion. I mean, then you kind of look at it from franchises that, like, what do they do next, sort of thing.
You talking about like making like a next type step?
Well, yeah, like, okay, what does the Lions offseason look like where they lost both of their coordinators?
Yeah.
They didn't win a playoff game. They had the best season in franchise history.
And nothing to show for
now
it.
they have to kind of start over with a coaching staff, an offensive philosophy.
Hutchinson coming back from injury.
More.
Yeah.
I think a number of their players are injured or could have questions as to their availability. Plus, they have to kind of decide who you're going to pay, who you're not going to pay.
Yeah.
Because you have a number of, they haven't missed any window by any means here. But it's when you don't win at the front of the run,
dude,
sustaining is one of the most difficult things in professional sports. And so,
because it's harder. The sport is rigged against those teams.
Look at the division they're in. Name the worst team is the Bears, and they could be really interesting this year. I mean, you could include them in the conversation of interesting off seasons with a new coach.
Yep.
What they choose to do as he puts that offense together. They, I believe, have some cap space to use. So there's that division alone. All 4 of those teams are kind of fascinating.
Yeah.
You go over to, I mentioned the Raiders with the Darnold thing. Like, what does that look like now with Pete Carroll in this division that's just loaded with coaches?
Yeah.
Jumping around here, I don't think anyone in the AFC South is interesting, so they're all out.
I mean, I guess I would say Houston just from that was a stink bomb of a year too.
Yeah, but I don't know that anything happens in the offseason. Like, it's like
changes it.
It's like, do they just need the calendar flip to kind of
they'll get guys back healthy, right? Like that was a huge part of
and then it's a question of like, who becomes the guy, you're probably not bringing Stephon Diggs back after he tears his ACL. So, like, who is your weapon opposite of Nico Collins? Like, what is your path forward with your offense? Are you building around Joe Mixon at running back now a little bit? Or was that just in lieu of the fact you always have these wide receivers injured? A lot of it to me is like what type of team these teams are choosing to set themselves up to be.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think the Bills have an inherently interesting offseason because I think it's the same offseason they've had.
Though last year they shed a lot of weight, and a lot of people, thought that they were going to take a step back.
But the idea is still the same. Like, they're on the precipice. How do they get to the, how do you get to the summit? I guess, if you will.
Like you said, when you miss out on it early,
right?
And
then that becomes really hard to sustain. Trying to think if there's anybody.
I mean, I know we talked about him earlier, so not to go too far into him, but the 49ers and just what they do, and do they make the decision with Brock Purdy now, which I think they will, and what that deal looks like.
Yeah,
and are there any other players that they're bringing in,
right?
That are going to help
out?
They
feel like they're headed to a soft reset.
Yeah, and they have a new defensive coordinator again.
Their Trey Lance draft trade, that capital, and what that organization could theoretically look like. And doesn't is such a wild
that they were able to do that. They made the NFC Championship game in 22. They made the Super Bowl in 23. Then they backslid obviously this last year, but like that they all did that and we're like, wow. And they did that, but with whiffing on the 3rd pick. Yeah, but now it's coming home to roost because you don't have a 3rd overall pick.
Well, and you don't have these cost-controlled great players either entering prime seasons of their career.
And now Deebo Samuel's on the Washington Commanders. Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's any other teams that I'm
Cardinals don't have anything that inherently stands out. NFC South, they just have different coaches in some spots.
Yeah.
And I don't know. The Falcons have an interesting offseason.
I'm kind of excited to watch.
Do with Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, I'm excited to watch Penix, but that's not offseason. That's more like, we'll see what happens.
What do the Seahawks do? Because Geno Smith is a free agent, right?
I believe so, right? And they got rid of their offensive coordinator, which is still weird to me because I didn't think Grubb was
a good spot for Sam Darnold to me as well.
Up in
Seattle, you have those wide receivers.
I didn't think that their offense was the reason that they missed out on doing anything.
I guess the Bengals would rank pretty highly as
well. Oh yeah, for sure. Because again, they have one of the best, in theory, one of the best quarterbacks in the league. He's made the Super Bowl, and
it's just largely like how do you put this back together while also now you're paying T. Higgins like he's a top 10 wide receiver, right?
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that what the cost of a tag is?
Believe so. Yeah.
So, but now you're paying literally 2 top 10 wide receivers.
See, but that's the worst part about doing the cap is
you're paying a massive quarterback.
Correct. But you can't finagle anything with the tag. Like if you sign him at least, just backload it. And again, not to just keep celebrating the stupid team that won, but that's what they do. You pay guys cheap now, and the bill does come home later. You're going to have to take home
the Vikings did that, and eventually you get into a situation where, but they made the playoffs with a 14-win team in cap hell with whatever was off of the Cousins thing and everyone else in the Rick Spielman regime. I mean, they had so much dead money. They had to get creative over these last couple years, and they've been able to do it. So you can, you don't have to be the Saints, where you're just going to be buried forever, seemingly, because you signed Taysom Hill for inexplicable gobs of money.
Eagles they had $63 million in dead cap money. I mean, like, what are we talking about here? Like, it's possible to do it. You just got to be smart with
the biggest thing is you need to want good players, and good players need to want.
And that's the thing. And I don't think that Mike Brown wants that. I don't think that he wants that in Cincinnati.
Well, I don't think he wants to pay good players.
Definitely not. Yeah, he likes having them, but he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to hold the reservation.
He would much rather be a baseball owner where he just doesn't have to pay their worth until they're old enough, and then he just lets them go.
Bye-bye. Yeah. Out into the world you go.